Hi, this is Steve here again. Today I'd very much like to talk to you about a point I've brought out in some of my insights books like ENOCH Insights and JASHER Insights. And I'd say that this is pivotal information. It's wisdom itself to understand about all the Apocrypha books, why they were written, and why they were supposedly written when they were written. Everybody knows about the Septuagint, and the Septuagint being the Greek version of the Torah. But what you need to know is the background of how it came about, and how subsequently came about all the Apocrypha books. Because at the moment we are taught erroneous teaching by educators and experts so-called on the Bible and the religious community who largely rejects the Apocryphal books for different reasons, by the way. But as an investigator and researcher, in having now done 7 of the insights or books based on 7 of the Apocrypha books, including the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, Book of Jasher, Book of 2nd EZDRAS, the Lost Books, Adam and Eve, and now I'm working on the Testament of 12 Patriarchs, which cover the whole spectrum of time from creation all the way unto Christ. And one of these days I'll probably work on the Maccabee books, because that's the latest in time of the Apocrypha books. But what I want to get across today is something very, very important. How do we know that the Apocrypha books were written in the time frame we were told? For example, we are told commonly that the Book of Enoch was not written by Enoch. It was a pseudepigraphical book written around about 300 BC. How do they know that? And then you find out all the other Apocrypha books are written somewhere, like the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs around 100 BC. How do they know that? Now I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in doing a lot of investigation and working on my books, I found out what we are taught, as usual, is totally erroneous. And it has an agenda behind it. There's always an agenda. Those who rule always have agenda when it comes to knowledge. When it's convenient to let people know, they allow knowledge. When it's not convenient to know, or it's against their agenda, then they hide knowledge and wisdom. Now, the story of the Apocrypha books, including, of course, the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Torah. How did this happen? Well, it all started with Alexander the Great, about 300 BC. Alexander the Great conquered the world in just 10 years. And in conquering, they were very rich, had a lot of gold, a lot of land. And it so happened that Alexander, as you know, he died at a young age of 33. He had a cousin called Ptolemy. Must have had links with Egypt. And when Alexander died, Ptolemy took over the Seleucid side of the Grecian Empire, the southern side, or in this case Egypt and other lands. And what the Greeks liked so much, contrary to the empire before them, the Medo-Persian Empire, which was very closed and knowledge was next to non-existence, the Greeks were different. They liked philosophy. They liked knowledge. And so they created the biggest library in the world at that time in Alexandria, the north coast of Africa. They were very rich because they'd conquered the world. And the next thing they did was they thought it would be good to have a copy of all the books in the world for their rich and wealthy philosophers and people to read. And so they started paying out a lot of money to pay for old manuscripts so that they could make a copy of them, and they could therefore put it into their luxurious well-to-do library in Alexandria. And although when you look on Wikipedia and you hear about this library in Alexandria, of course they just exalt all the philosophers like Plato and Cicero and all these famous people back then in the Grecian Empire. But inadvertently, in spite of the world powers luxuriating in making nice libraries for themselves, but in the process, they helped the poor of the land. Because what happened was, over in Israel, they had priceless books over there, ancient books. And so, things started happening. The Grecian Empire, under the Pharaoh, as he was part of the southern part of the Grecian Empire, he invited 70 educated men from Israel to come along. I think it was 6 from each tribe, something like that. And they went to Alexandria and they translated the Torah from Hebrew into Greek. And they paid them a lot of money to do it as well. Now, I brought out in Enoch Insights how I was a bit suspicious of something. When I was doing Enoch Insights, I was suspicious about the Septuagint. In many ways, I think the Septuagint is an excellent version of the Old Testament, but it has one major flaw, and that is that in our Bibles, in the West, and the Catholic Bible, creation is dated at 4004 BC. But in the Septuagint, it's dated 1,500 years earlier. And I thought that was strange. We have a difference in opinion of dates between the different churches of East and West. And when I investigated, let me tell you something. First, by inspiration, I felt there was something corrupt. And what I felt was that since a lot of money was involved in making copies of different books from all over the world for prestige in Alexandria, they had paid these 70 Jewish scholars a lot of money. Come and make a copy of the Torah in Greek. All right, there's obviously, maybe there were even Jewish people living already down there for quite some time. So they also knew Greek, which was now the language of the world. I suspect that this happened probably a bit later than the beginning of Ptolemy's reign, because these Jewish scholars would have had to learn Greek, and Greek had to be the language taking over everywhere. So probably about 270 BC, I'd reckon. Not 330 BC when Alexander took over, but later, maybe 60 years later. Then this was all being established, and Septuagint came into formation by the Jewish scholars. But this is what I thought. You see, when I write my books, I don't just go by intellectual knowledge, biblical knowledge, or Bible experts. I go a lot by inspiration. I pray, I ask God to give me inspiration. I ask him to speak to me, especially about unusual things and questionable things. And I remember distinctly that when I asked a question about the library at Alexandria, what I was getting was they paid them off. Because I was wondering about these dates. How could the dates be different and why? And what I got when I prayed about it was the Pharaoh, or Ptolemy, he paid the 70 Jewish writers or scholars to just do him one big favor. He'd already given him a lot of money for making a copy in Greek, the Septuagint, but he asked them to change one thing, one major thing in the Bible. He asked them to add 100 years to all the people after the flood, so that to make them look like they were 100 years older than they really were. And the net effect of this, and I think they even did it before the flood too, the net effect of this was to push back the timeline 1,500 years. Now, why did Ptolemy want to do this? Simple. Egypt wanted to be recognized as the ones who built the pyramids and the Sphinx when they didn't. When we investigate more, we find actually that the Sphinx and the pyramids could not have been made by man. We can't even build them today. They were built by a super race, a race that existed before the flood. But Pharaoh couldn't stand that, and neither could the Grecian Empire. The fact that there were the pyramids, there was a Sphinx, and they weren't getting any credit for it. So it was simple. They changed the timeline in one of the most important books, the Torah, or the Old Testament, shoved the timeline back, and then it made it look as if Egypt was the one who built the pyramids and the Sphinx. And I got that all by inspiration. I wrote it down in my book, Enoch Insights. And lo and behold, 3 months after I got that inspiration, I read exactly the same thing by others who found out that that was the case. You know, it's unbelievable, you know, when you can ask questions and you get answers from the spirit world, and then later it's proven by others. You know, I was totally blown away at the time, and I did put a little bit of it in my book. I don't know if I can find it right now. You'll have to read my book, Enoch Insight and JASHER Insight. If I can find it, I will. Here it is. Look at this here. This is a confirmation of what I first got inspiration. It's just a comment 7 here in the appendix 15 about the biblical and the Septuagint. The other side of the story. The odd twist concerning the Septuagint. Like I said, normally I really like the Septuagint for everything, except this point. The oldest and the most important translation of the Hebrew Old Testament is the Septuagint, LXX. It's translated from Hebrew into Greek in the 3rd century BC in Alexandria, Egypt. The letter to Aristide tells a story how the Egyptian king Ptolemy II, 285 to 247 BC, ordered his librarian Demetrius to collect all the books of the world. And Demetrius thought there should be a Greek translation of the Torah. So 72 Jews, 6 from each tribe, were sent to translate the Torah into Greek, which they did in 72 days. Larson believes that the translators of the LXX or Septuagint tried to harmonize the biblical chronology with Egyptian chronology. Here, change the timeline of Manetho by adding 100 years to the patriarchs' ages to push back the time of the flood before the first Egyptian dynasty, because there is no record of the Great Flood. See, that's almost word for word what I got in inspiration, or in prophecy, if you want to call it. What I got from heaven was exactly that, and here's somebody confirming what I got 3 months before this. Early Christian chronologists emphasized the perfect agreement of the Manetho with the Septuagint, Larson 4:3-4. It's interesting to see how they understood Genesis by the way they translated the text. So what is wonderful is, you know, when you have the gifts of the Spirit like prophecy, and you can tune into heaven, then you can find out things that nobody else knows about. And the wonderful thing is then when you can get it confirmed by either science or by theologians or something later. So like I say, I largely go, first of all, from inspiration in my book, especially with difficult topics and matters which nobody seems to know much about, or there's not much written about it. Well, so that's basically it. So that was with the Septuagint, but that's not the only thing. Once they learned they could make a lot of money with some of the old books knocking around in different countries, then they thought it would be good to take the book of Enoch, which was an old manuscript lying around there in Israel. They took this old manuscript and had it taken over to the library in Alexandria, and not only being paid a lot of money to translate everything into Greek, but also it meant that a lot more people would be reading their books, because up until this liberty of the Grecian Empire having this big library in Alexandria, only a few people knew about the book of Enoch over there in Israel, but nobody else did. Once it was put in the library in Alexandria, everybody would be reading it. And as it worked with the book of Enoch in about 300 BC, right after the Septuagint, then they started doing it through the whole duration of the Grecian Empire until round about 100 BC, when there was a waning interest or didn't have quite the power and ability. But anyway, they did also translate the Testament of the 12 Patriarchs there too. So all these Apocrypha books, it wasn't that they were written, like some claim the Testament of the Patriarchs was written in 100 BC by some famous Pharisee who was actually one of the Maccabees. They claimed stuff like this, but when you actually read the books, you find it now. These books were actually written by the people that's claimed that they were. Like the book of Enoch was written by Enoch. The book of the 12 Patriarchs was written by the 12 Patriarchs. And you can prove it. But what's happened is, when you hear that, oh no, it's pseudo-epigraphical writing of the book of Enoch in 300 BC, no. That's when they took the old manuscript of the book of Enoch and they rewrote it down. And that's when it became famous. And that's the same with all the other Apocrypha books too. They were real books, very old books, like the Lost Books of Adam and Eve, for example. I also worked on them. Lost Books of Adam and Eve, or Eden Insights. Those are original books. And the original books, they started with the Lost Books of Adam and Eve before the flood. True story from Adam and Eve. And probably written down either by Cain or by Enoch. They were the first writers. Then you got the book of Enoch. Then next I say the book of Jasher in time. Then Jubilees written by Moses. And I forgot to say here, the Testament of 12 Patriarchs was written before Jubilees by the 12 Patriarchs, about 250 years before Moses. And after that you have about 500 BC, you have the second EZDRAS, or EZDRAS Insights. So all my books cover the period of time from the beginning of creation all the way up to Christ. I'm thinking the only book I'm missing on Insights is the Maccabees, in order to give a complete historical picture from which we can get a perfect vision of things. But I want people to understand that when they are told that the book of Enoch was not real, or the Apocrypha books are not real, consider this: they were all in the Bible. Most of them were in the Bible until 1885. Why were they taken out? They'd been there for almost 2,000 years. Not the book of Enoch, Jasher, and Jubilees. They were too big to be in the Bible, but there was 14 other Apocrypha books that were in the Bible, including second EZDRAS, which I have covered in EZDRAS Insights. But I just want to conclude here by stating that world powers, they allow knowledge to the people if it suits their purpose. But when it doesn't suit their purpose and their paradigm or whatever they're doing, then they bury things. And if they can't do that, like they did when they buried the book of Enoch for 1,000 years under the Catholic Church, you could be burned at the stake for having a copy of it. Why did they do that? Because the powers that be, they didn't want people to know about the fallen angels. They didn't want to know about the rebellion at the beginning of time. And the devil's been trying to hide things ever since. So the fact that they had that massive library under the beginning of the Grecian Empire for several hundred years, that enabled a lot of old manuscripts to flourish, come out of hidden places, and those involved got paid a lot of money, but the net result was the whole world heard about these books. And that's why you hear about the Apocrypha books from a time period of 100 BC to 300 BC. They weren't written at that time. They weren't pseudepigraphical books. They were just recopied from ancient, very old manuscripts. And the fact was, the older the manuscript, the more money they were paid. Now that's the true story of the library in Alexandria and the Apocrypha books and the Septuagint. Bye for now. If you'd like to know more, please do get hold of my Insights books. Enoch Insights, Jasher Insights, Eden Insights, EZDRAS Insights, Jubilees Insights. You'll find a lot of wisdom in these books. These ancient Jewish books, these ancient Hebrew books, they're fantastic. They complement the Bible. They don't take away from the Bible. They complement the stories in the Bible and make it even fuller. And it's very inspiring in reading. You gain a lot of wisdom and knowledge from reading from these books. Well, that's enough from me, Steve. Have a great day, everybody. Bye for now. Oh, no, don't do that. Good God, I'm a blabbermouth. 19 minutes. I'm on the limit there. 19 minutes, 50 seconds. You're only allowed 20 minutes. Oops.